In normal times, I would have a lot of fun with this gospel reading. But the next few weeks, we're going to be doing something that isn't normal in a lectionary-based church. I'm going to be doing what the nerds in academia call expository sermons, sermons on a theme. But this week, I want to introduce to you what we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks. Who here remembers last year's stewardship season? Okay, just a bonus. Does anyone remember any of the 4 questions we discussed last year?
What would you do if St. Anne's didn't exist?
Yeah, what would you do if St. Anne's went away or didn't exist? Does anyone else remember the other ones?
I think something like what does St. Anne's mean to you?
Yes. What does St. Anne's mean to you? How do you find your lived experience of God, and how does St. Anne's affect that? So last year we focused a lot on how we find God as a parish community at our congregation. And that is a wonderful thing, and that's something that we should probably keep in mind at all times, because otherwise, why are we here in the first place? So it occurred to me, after asking the question, which stuck in a lot of people's minds last year, what would you do if St. Anne's went away? What would you do if St. Anne's went away was a sobering question for us all, myself included. And it kind of woke us up to the reality of, we cannot assume that this place will always be here. We have a responsibility together to continue and to faithfully steward this place that is so meaningful to us for finding our connection with God, with one another, and the deepening of our own selves. So, a little sobering, but still good conversation. Well, the question that came to my mind later on was, what would Fremont do if St. Anne's went away? What would Fremont do if St. Anne's went away? What would be noticed? What would be missed? What would be lost? Now, notice the difference between those two questions. What would you do if St. Anne's went away is about our internal community, and that's vital. What would Fremont do if St. Anne's went away makes us think about all of the area around us that is not here. And the question that comes to mind is, well, what is the calling that God has called St. Anne's to? Now, most of you probably grew up thinking that the term calling only applies to clergy. Raise your hand if you grew up in that mindset. That's pretty common. So that's actually not true. The disadvantage we have in inheriting a medieval model of church is that it was basically the priests and the clergy did things for and on behalf of the laity, not with. You've heard me talk about this before, but I wanted to reiterate that to you. If we are the body of Christ, it's hard for the body to move around and do the things that the eyes are seeing to be done if you don't have legs. And it's also hard to reach out and embrace people if you don't have the arms. It's also really hard to see what needs to be there if the eyes aren't even there. So each and every part of the body is necessary for the body to do what the body is needing to do. So, what is the calling of each and every one of you as individuals? What is the calling of St. Anne's in the community? And how do we steward the community to meet that calling? This is what we're going to be discussing. So let's step back a little bit. St. Anne's, I call it the little church that could. Because in spite of everything, y'all managed to survive. And it's awesome. And you have so much vitality. How did you start out? We were a mission out of St. James. The expansion of God's calling, God's ministry in the Episcopal Church in Fremont. You are a necessary movement out into the community beyond the parameters of the first congregation. In fact, most parishes start out as missions of a larger congregation. Now, you are no longer a mission. You are a parish. You are your own self-standing congregation in the Diocese of California. You've endured some hardships. I've heard some very interesting stories about some not so great behavior on the part of both laity and clergy in your past. You endured a great schism about 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, and that's hard. I applaud the fact that the church chose to let the Spirit breathe new life by allowing you to trust that Carol Cleland was called to this congregation. But that meant you hired a woman, and that doesn't always go over so well, as we very well know. But what I love about the silver lining of that schism, where a lot of people left, is it freed you up to dive more deeply. This is the story that I've heard. And to really cultivate new ways of understanding what it means to be the congregation of St. Anne's. And you continue in that process as you go. Now, you also accomplish the unexpected. Who would have thought that in 3 years of traumatic society-wide events, we would be in such good shape? Now, our budget is still a challenge, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But you have managed to work hard. You've managed to rally when it counts to make sure that our finances are as good as they can be. Your generosity is stellar. And what I notice also is that in some ways we have been surviving. We're the little church that survives. Now, if you haven't read my rector's letter in the pledge packets that you got, it's okay. I remember when I was in Georgia and the preacher was preaching, and he was talking about how they were about to make a land sale that was going to finally cancel an $8 million deficit. Wow. $8 million. I said, what? You did what? And he said, when I was first hired, one of the things that I said was that we're going to erase this debt because I don't want us to be thinking about ourselves based on our budget. I want us to cancel that debt so we can actually focus our money on the ministry that we have been called to do. It was that moment where I realized that's what we need to explore. Because, yeah, you're a Baptist church with about 400 or 500 parishioners in Georgia, so that's a lot more doable. However, if they can do that, what can we do? How can we figure out ways to be creative about how we steward, not because we want to survive, but because we're doing that in the service of the calling to which we are called. And that's why we're going to be discussing those things. And that's why I want us to think about what it is that is our responsibility and our gift to the Tri-City area as a uniquely called congregation. Now, calling is a big, fancy, vague word, and we're going to discuss what that means for us. But I think this is going to be an exciting thing, because if we have that focus, the thing is, we survived, we endured hardships. To what purpose? And how do we do that? So, instead of the usual, maybe have a couple things said, talk about how our budget is difficult and only there, I want, as our treasurer comes up in a moment, to give us a state of the budget, to think in terms of, if we have that common thread, that common goal, that thing that we know is who we are, that God has put us here to do, how will that help us come alive in new ways? Because a calling is not just doing what the world needs, but it's finding out what makes you come alive and go do it. What is it that makes you come alive? What is it that makes St. Anne's come alive? And how do we give that life to the community and the community back to us? So we're going to figure out how we can be faithful stewards, not only of the resources that God gives us, but of our own cultivation of our calling, our purpose in the world, and how to make sure that we aim for that as we move out into the world and as we have our discussions the next few weeks.